Welcome to Wealthy Mind, where we talk about all things finances, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the surprising. Welcome to Wealthy Mind. I am your host, Misty Rose Gold, International Success Coach, where we help create and maintain wealthy minds. Today I have with me Boris Katsnelson. Did I say that right?
Close. Katsnelson.
Katsnelson. Okay. I'm notorious for messing up last names.
Good. I won't hold it against you.
That's good. So, Boris, I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you. You have such a specialized niche within the M&A space. Would you please tell the audience what the name of your company is and what do you do?
Yeah, so I work with a boutique investment bank in Denver, Colorado called Black Iron Advisors. And we work with sellers to basically maximize their value of their probably most valuable asset, their company. And that's a journey that can begin years before they're ready. And we love working with sellers early on to help maximize their value. But in a quick and dirty, that's what we do. We help them maximize the value of their assets, mainly, their business, and we do that. Run it. We'll get into the details of it, but we run a pretty rigorous kind of way we do that, which I'd love to share with your audience.
Yeah, definitely. So, you've told me that you work with mainly franchise owners, right?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of franchisors and franchisees, and I'll give you the
Mm.
backstory on that. But about 80+% of my clients come in that niche, and that's because I bought a franchisor that I ran as CEO about 11 years ago in 2014 and ran that business, for about 3.5 years. Then I was a franchisee in two systems. And franchising is kind of an interesting business model in that the people are super collegial, and I still have a very strong network there. And just opportunities come just because people know what I'm doing now. And yeah, it's been a blessing to kind of help people through that journey, both at the franchisor level and large single and multi-unit franchisees.
Yeah, that's such a cool niche in the M&A space. Like, you know, STR Ventures, and they don't
Yeah.
specialize that far down. You also know Cindy Rayfield, right?
Hmm.
So I just had her on the podcast. It was a few episodes back, or maybe a couple episodes back. So I just had her on the podcast, and you guys kind of play off of each other, don't you?
Yeah, so Cindy is a friend too, and she actually, crazy story, the franchise that I bought after running Speed Pro, which was the franchisor that I ran, was a business called College Hunks Hauling Junk and Moving. And Cindy plays in this niche of finding franchisees. And when we grew that business and we sold it, and Cindy found our buyer for that business. So it was, kind of a fun story. So we keep in touch and all that. So yeah,
That's excellent.
excited to hear her episode. Yeah.
Right? Do you utilize her when you're looking for buyers for your sellers?
We do. Yeah, we reach out to consultants like what Cindy does, and they have a universe of folks that are looking at businesses. As you know, she does a lot of new startups. We are essentially selling what in the franchise world is called resales, right? So it's an existing business running. And so, yeah, in that case, she found her buyer. We reach out to her on other opportunities when we're selling now, and her and other folks like, she's with a group called IFPG, as you know, other groups like that find, franchise people that are interested in franchising. So yeah, they're a great, basically a resource and partner for that part of it when we sell franchisees.
That's wonderful. I love our network.
absolutely. Very intertwined.
I
Yeah,
know. Well, there's 1 degree of separation between most of us, and then it's like, oh, you need to meet Boris, or like you and I just kept running into each other at the coffee shops.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah, it's great. And I love how we're able to support each other, even if there's some crossover in industries. Like you and Cindy, there might be a little bit of crossover, maybe kind of, but you guys can help each other out, which is great. There's no competition. I think it's wonderful. And just the fact that you're so specialized with franchises sets you apart, I believe.
for
It's
sure.
quite amazing to me. And then you have the background in it. So you didn't just kind of pick it out of thin air. It's like, well, I kind of know this industry, so why not?
Yeah, I mean that's part big reason why I specialize there, right? As you would expect. But I'm just not a guy that sells businesses, right? I've operated in the niche, and it franchising is a little bit of a unique animal. Like any business has its nuances, right? But franchising in particular is like there's so many different layers, like the franchise consulting side of it, what Cindy does, and people always are interested, like how do I sell franchises? And groups like hers are a big part of that. And then there's just so many different like other elements of it, like different. They're kind of the consulting side of it. There's FSOs, which kind of work with brands directly as their outside or outsourced sales organization. There's just an example on just the front, tip of the spear, the selling side of it. And yeah, anyway, so I like to talk to, we've got another client that is a multi-unit owner in a franchise system, and just giving some broader guidance to him as he thinks about expansion, and
Mhm.
knowing that I've worn the franchisor hat, I can give some good guidance on that ultimately. So it pays to have some specialization for sure.
Mhm.
We're generalists as a firm, though, what we do, and we'll get into the process we run. But it helps to have specialization, certainly, right? So we've sold a roofing companies. I do a lot in consumer products. I've got a background in that as well, e-commerce and on offline as well.
Mhm.
So it definitely helps to know. But again, most, like you pointed out, probably 85% of my clients are some semblance of franchising.
Yeah, oh, well, I think it's special that you've done that, and it's definitely needed in the M&A space. And it's nice to know that the other advisors at Black Iron, they might specialize in something else. So
Yep.
you guys can cover different areas of the market. If it's not something that you want to handle, maybe somebody else can handle it. Now, what is the price range
Yeah.
that you work with?
Yeah, so our kind of average enterprise value or deal size, kind of when we look back in history, the firm's been around for about 6 years. And
Hmm.
I'll just give a quick story. We all kind of came from bigger investment banks and doing, like, I did multi-billion dollar M&A deals earlier in my career, and got that big sort of company lens. And the two founders have come from bigger shops as well. And they decided when they founded the firm to basically go a little bit down market. So we work on $1 to $7 million EBITDA deals typically, and those turn into, call it 10 to 100 of revenue, and deal size averages, in the 30 to 40 range. Ultimately, it's up to us, myself as a managing director, to take whatever deals I want to. Like, for instance, right
Mm.
now we're working on somewhere in the $2 to $3 million value range. But it's also in a system that, it's a big system. This is a multi-unit franchisee, and I think we'll probably do a number of transactions here. So, we're happy to take those on, and where it makes sense, like a one-off $2 million deal probably wouldn't be a fit, but in that dynamic of a franchise where we can really get things dialed in and do multiple deals, it does make sense.
Okay. Well, that's good. Do you want to explain what EBITDA means to the general public?
Sure, you bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the finance talk of that, I mean, basically it's what is the business cash flow in a given year, and the term is, just short for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is a mouthful, and we could just call it EBITDA or EBITDA. But it's really like, everyone, top line is revenue, all your expenses, and then you add back interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Depreciation and amortization are cash they're just accounting terms. Essentially, you depreciate equipment over 10 years, so you add that back because it's non-cash. And interest and taxes are, depends on how you're financing your business. If you've got debt, you'll have interest. So someone could own a company with no debt, so they wouldn't have interest. So we just try to normalize it. That's why we kind of get to this EBITDA term. But as
Mhm.
business owners, you don't need to really worry about it too much. We look at your financial statements and we can kind of do the math in concert with your accountant. Most business owners, at the level that we deal with mostly understand those terms and get it. But we're happy to, do some market education for folks. And some of this stuff is a little bit esoteric, like really kind of you need to know a bit about, so we present things with what we call add back. So a lot of business owners will add things back into their business. So or sorry, they will run things through their business that are maybe not business oriented expense. They may have a kid on the payroll that isn't really working in the business. They may put different expenses for their household or whatnot. So we add all those back into, get an adjusted EBITDA number and all that. And
Mhm.
then we sell off of those metric, basically whatever that number is. Typically there's a multiple, which is, times whatever number for certain industries. So if it's a franchisor, you're talking about probably 10, 15, even 20 times that EBITDA number. If you're a franchisee, depending on the industry and the growth and the size, it could be as low as two or three and as high as, seven or eight typically. So it just very much depends on the industry, the growth prospects, the growth path, lots of different things at play that, that's what, kind of why we do what we do and why we have a role to kind of help unpack that and help maximize value for entrepreneurs.
Yes, and you are blowing up my brain with financial details. So if if somebody is curious about learning more and they have a business or a franchise and they talk with you, do you have consultations? Like, what is that structure? How do people work with you? Because, of course, that's going to blow up a lot of people's brains. They're going to be like, I'm just going to let the experts handle this, right? So, what's that engagement look like with you?
Yeah. Yeah, for us, we start working with folks early in a process where we just do it based on good faith, right? We know we want to add
Mm.
value to folks. And once it comes to transaction, then, we want to already be part of their kind of trusted advisor team. And, but we've not signed an engagement with anybody until we're ready to kind of do a deal, right? That some of the, like that multi-unit franchisee I was talking to you about, we're part of kind of quote unquote his team, right? But I don't have a signed engagement letter. And so how we work is purely like we'll start working with someone. And if they, if it's a mutually beneficial relationship, we'll keep working with them and continue to add value throughout that journey. Ultimately, we get paid on a transaction only. We don't
Only.
charge retain. Yeah, we don't
Okay.
charge any retainers. We don't have any kind of like hourly consulting fees. We do all that kind of on the, as part of our business development efforts, you could say. It tends to work out pretty well, where people say, I wouldn't even think to go anywhere else because we've just been working together for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever it may be. And, we just play the long game. And even if they choose to go in a different direction, it's okay. We get other opportunities
Mhm.
as a result of it. It's just, and we think good karma, add
Yeah.
value, be helpful, and, fruit will come from it. But our model is we only get retained on, a deal when we're working with somebody, and we get paid a percentage of the deal. It depends on the size of the deal as to what that percentage looks like and also the scope of the engagement. If we're just negotiating with one party, which we do a handful of times, where someone, may get approached by somebody and said, "This is a dream acquirer. We don't want to run a full marketing process," which we can talk about in a second. Just help us get to the finish line with these guys, and we're happy to do that. Versus running a full process, we'll come back to, but yeah, it just depends on the deal as to what we charge. But we always, in all our cases, we want to, be we want to pay for ourselves in what we do, right? Like we want to make sure we're adding at least, and our range is between 1% and 9%, just to be really clear. And, if it's a smaller deal, it'll be at the higher percentage, and that sort of thing. But we always want to improve the deal that someone could do on their own by at
Sure.
least that percentage. And off almost always, in my experience, we're many multiples of that, and then we're guiding the whole process and making it a lot easier on the seller. Whereas, if you did it by yourself, one, it's a very involved process. Number one, like I've been M&A since I kind of graduated, college, and it's involved. And we will also, you got to run your business. That's the main thing, and that's what really happens and hurts people a lot is that they start getting involved in trying to be the investment banker. And then
Right.
if their business flips a little bit, well, you can imagine they get hammered in that deal. And then it takes a while to kind of recover from that.
Hmm.
Right. So we try to be, almost effectively like a costless resource to them because we're adding value and we're handling the whole process. And that business owner can just focus on running their business, which is what created the value in the first place.
And maintains the value so they can sell it with, a greater ROI, which, yeah, so important. So you are saying a message that we've heard before, that I've heard before. It's make sure that you stay in, the business owner needs to stay in their lane, bring on an expert like yourself to cover the sell of the business so that the revenue continues to stay steady or increasing during that process to make it desirable. And it just makes sense. And I like that you guys work off of good faith and good karma. It's like the go-giver principle. If
Mhm.
you just go help people, and it may not always come back to you from where you gave, but it will come back to you eventually. So
Yep.
people, there's no upfront fees, if I'm hearing you correctly. There's no retainer
Right.
fees. You only make your money on the transaction. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah,
That's
even more so, it's only, so oftentimes with transactions, there may be some contingent consideration, right? Like earn out if the business does such and such revenue, then we'll pay you a little bit more. We only get paid on that if and when it's paid, or a seller note or things like that, or equity, right? Which is not paid at closing. So that does a couple things, right? It motivates us as your investment banker to cut the best deal for you, which may be some contingent compensation, but you're not paying me on the front end of that, which that consideration may or may not get paid.
Mhm.
But you were still involved as your partner because if no other reason than selfishly, we want to get paid our percentage on that, right? But we're obviously in it for the business owner and structuring the right deal for them. So those are kind of some unique things about how the founders of Black Iron set up our organization. And, it really resonates with business owners because business owners are used to, well, I don't want to pay you for something that I'm not, getting direct value. A lot of the market does work with retainers. We're trying to, I wouldn't say it's completely a paradigm shift. I mean, other people do what we do in the same business structure, but we just think it's very pro owner, right? And it's just purely like alignment. That's really what we're
Mhm.
striving for, is like a total win-win alignment.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for showing up differently in the market because it sets you apart. It's,
Mhm.
I mean, how do you set yourself apart from all the other M&A firms? Well, this is how you guys found your blue
Yeah.
ocean.
Yeah, a bit, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you've talked about your process a couple of times. Do you want to elaborate?
yeah, absolutely. So what we do, so process-wise, there's a couple steps, right? We get our all the materials together, which is financial, obviously heavy financial, but also on the team, on the business and products, how you go to market, what your competitors are, all the things. And we put together what's called a confidential information memorandum, or CIM, CIM for short. And that's a 50 to 100 plus page dense deck that we share with people once they've signed an NDA. So we basically, and the total process is like a 6 to 9 month journey once we launch, and it depends on a number of factors, which I'll come back to. But so we put the materials together. We put a confidential. So that's all confidential. But before people get under NDA, prospective buyers, we put together a teaser, which is you wouldn't be able to identify what the company is through that, but we give people enough information to say this is a multi-unit franchise that serves the, fitness niche as an example. And we're pretty vague about it depending on our client's desire for confidentiality. In one case, we're representing a brand actually live currently where we just said Colorado Front Range, which, you could be a lot of different places, right, in the Front Range, but we didn't want to identify where it was specifically or even a region within the Front Range. So anyway, that teaser goes out to a broad audience that we're trying to reach. And then we get people that show interest. We send them an NDA, and then we send them this confidential information memorandum. And then they basically communicate with them as to say, answer any questions about the business. But we try to do our due diligence on the front end. So that's super comprehensive. That's why it's so dense.
Hmm.
And we get a lot of feedback that this is a lot of information and it's really well prepared and all that. Not to pat ourselves on the back, but it just makes for a smoother process for everybody
Hmm.
when we disclose really everything that we found in our analysis, and good, bad, and ugly, because ultimately people that buy companies are not dumb. They've got lenders that are not dumb. They're going to
Right.
find it anyway.
And
I'd
you're
rather
not
figure it
dumb.
out.
You're not
Yeah,
dumb.
I'd rather tell you on the front end,
Yeah.
right? And so we can, just talk about it, right? And just discuss it, right? So if there's a competitor that came into a market that caused a certain little bit of softness, I don't want to hope that, Misty's not going to find it in due diligence. No, we're going to tell you about it because high likelihood you will anyway. And let's get it on the front end versus a gotcha that comes up in due diligence that kills a deal, right? So we want to
Hmm.
get all the things on the front end. So we run that process and the marketing side of it. And that runs, it could be a month, it could be 4, it could be longer, depending on the market interest and appetite for that asset. And then
Hmm.
ultimately we do typically what's called a two-step process where people give indications of interest, which is all of this is non-binding. All of it is binding once you sign a purchase agreement kind of at the end and you close on the deal. But this is non-binding, an indication of interest. And then we'll kind of, present those to our sellers and say, okay, here's what we're looking at. We've got 20 people or whatever presented these IOIs to us that are interested in the business. Let's, figure out who we like, right? So we're not going to have 20 meetings with people because that's too many. Let's narrow the field to whether it's 6 or 12 or whatever it may be that makes sense for you. And we tell them the pros and cons because we've talked to them. The seller has not at this point. And then we have management meetings, and those are all virtual now in sort of the COVID days. Everything's virtual, and they present the story and Q&A with the management team. And then we ask for, there's some follow up after that. And then we ask for letters of intent or LOIs, still non-binding. And then from there, we pick one party to go under exclusivity to get to the finish line. And they do their due diligence. We're supporting, the company and responding to all those due diligence requests that span accounting, legal, benefits, you name it. Like it's a full on, proctological exam. There's no better way to put it, but it's deep examination of the business because the buyer
Right.
wants to know everything about it. And then we're liaising with the advisors, kind of we talked about early, like, we want to help there with positioning and getting the right folks around the table. And we get to a successful exit. So that's kind of the process that we follow.
Hmm. Wow. Well, you're certainly not dumb. You know your stuff, which is, I'm just sitting here, I'm admiring how much you know about your industry and just how detailed you are. And I can tell that you really care about your people and what you do. It's
Thank
nice.
you.
It's
Yeah, we
very
do.
nice. So I celebrate how much you know. I celebrate and how much you care. That's really important to have both.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Can we talk about just early on? Because I think what you do, I want to weave into this conversation because I think it's really important. Like when we're touching and working with a seller early, right? Working with
Hmm.
a business coach,
Hmm.
I think is really important because we also know our swim lane also, right? Like
Yeah.
we're not coaches, right? There is what we call couch time through a deal because it's very, there's a lot involved, especially when you get a due diligence request list that's 200 items long. The seller's minds explode. We have to remind them why they're doing this in the first place. But early on in that journey, I think, where we've talked a lot about how we collaborate is bringing, you into a conversation early where it's like, okay, in order to make this better outcome for the seller,
Hmm.
we need to make these kind of changes to pivot in the business. And a lot of that is, you know, mindset things, team things. So maybe you touch on a few
Culture.
things that, yeah, all the things,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not what we do, but
Hmm.
we know what good looks like when we want to sell it, and where Misty Rose Gold can come in. So let's sort of riff on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So what I would say is if you were an investor, would you buy your business? And look at it through that lens. So I love asking my people that question, and they always come
Right.
up with reasons why they wouldn't. And then those are
Mhm.
the things that we want to work on. And some of them
Right.
are obvious to the business owner and some are not. And that's where my perspective and outside view comes from and comes into play
Mhm.
is being able to put outside eyes on the business and say, you know what? I think we need to sweeten the culture because culture is everything within the company. If we look at a
Right.
culture and the culture is toxic and disjointed and chaotic, I wouldn't want to buy that. I want to buy
Mhm.
something that is running smoothly and has, I'm not going to tell people what the culture needs to be. They get to identify that. But as a buyer, I would want to make sure that I'm buying into not just a financially successful business, but what is the culture? Do the people love working
Right.
there? Because if they hate working there and I come in and buy the business, guess what's going to happen? They're going to hate me.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
it
and I
might,
can tell you, buyers see that, right? People think of those as like non-financial and it doesn't really matter. It
oh,
matters
it
a
does.
ton.
It does.
Yeah, people get that, and people buy for culture, and you can see it. Like you can see it, as you do diligence, and
Hmm.
buyers are not dumb, right? Like we keep going back. So I think that work that you do, like, what is obviously it's very bespoke to the situation,
Hmm.
but what's an example of that? I feel like I'm interviewing you now, but I think it's important to talk about this because the front end stuff makes my job a lot easier and better outcomes for,
Hmm.
mutual clients of ours. So how do you do what you do?
I work with individual businesses based on what their business needs are and what the owner's need is as a leader, as an individual. So when people think about me, I want them to think about business strategy and business psychology. And
Hmm.
culture falls into that. Leadership falls into that. Communication skills within the company and with the clients. That's important as well. It all falls into that. And then create a strategy. So I look at things through a logical lens and also a creative lens. So I'm a bit of a unicorn in that space. I see big picture and the small steps that are needed in order to implement whatever that goal is. So everything I do with clients is goal focused. What is our goal? Now let's unravel that goal and figure it out together. So there's a perfect example of a client that I worked with. It was a franchise owner and they
Mm.
couldn't figure out how to make the business profitable. So they brought me in as their Hail Mary. They're
Mm.
like, we need help. We are failing at this miserably. Okay, cool. So I started having weekly sessions with this client and the GM, mostly the GM, and I'm sitting and like figuring out, okay, what's your bidding like? Even though you have a franchise, you still have to kind of run the
Mhm.
business. You still have to make a lot of
Totally.
decisions, right? So the bidding process, they were massively underbidding in the jobs. So we looked at that lens.
Mm.
And then I realized through like a few sessions, okay, the GM is not leading this company. There's four people pulling it in four different directions. So
Mm.
what do I need to do to get him to step up as the leader and pull the company in one direction instead of four? It was very disjointed. So what it came
Wow.
down to is that he did not have a good communication style. He refused to communicate. He refused to take the reins. He refused to give direction and leadership because he had massive abuse in his home life when he was a child. So
Oh,
we
wow.
got to the bottom of it. Now, here's the thing. We got to the bottom of it, and I threw a Hail Mary because I had a 3-month trial engagement with them. And in 3 months, I was able to identify all the things that they needed to figure out in order to make the company profitable. You can't even think
Hmm.
about selling it at this point, right? We need to turn a profit first. So
Yeah, for sure.
in 3 months' time, I was able to turn it around to the point of, okay, here's now what we need to focus on. Here's the things that are getting in the way of profit. Now let's work on them. So, what I had to do at the end in order to get the GM to shift his perspective and be willing to communicate with the employees, I had to say, okay, we're going to close the doors in a month's time if we don't figure this out.
Mm. It was that
And
dire.
the owner was in agreement with me because we had to get it to shift. And he was like,
Hmm.
what happens if my GM doesn't step up? I said, well, you know, you have the wrong person in the role.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was my Hail Mary. And in that Hail Mary, I said, I'm going to remove myself from this coaching engagement. So you've got the rest of the 3-month agreement. I'm removing myself from the engagement, and we're going to tell him that we're closing the doors because that was our play. That was the only option we had. Either
Hmm.
become profitable or close the doors.
Yeah.
So we all had a little powwow, and the GM, we told him, hey, we're closing the doors by this time. It was like a month or two. And you could see the emotion in his face, and his heart sunk into his shoes and then came back up.
Hmm.
And within like 10, 15 minutes, there was a light that came on inside of him. And he was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're not closing the doors. I got to figure this out. And that encouraged
Hmm.
him to step up and push through his communication issues. And then he divulged to me that there was a lot of abuse at home. And that
Hmm.
was the reason why he refused to communicate effectively with the employees. So
Wow.
we were able to
But
identify those
get that
things.
real.
Oh, I
But
get
but the
real.
owner, yeah, but the owner didn't, interestingly, like this obviously had gone on for a while, right? So I
Years,
think coming,
years.
yeah. So coming with your background experience to go and like unpack this
Mhm.
and having building the trust with the owner, obviously that, is like, hey, this business needs help. I don't know what to do. We've been doing this for years and you've come in to fix it. That's, yeah, I mean, and identify the issues, which are not easy to find, right? And then take
Not
a
for
big
most
leap to
people.
go, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and then really like diagnose it and say, okay, this is the only way to get, given the personality, to get him moving in this
Hmm.
direction. Like we have to say like game over. And then so did it work ultimately? How does the story end?
It worked.
Right.
So, yep, it worked. He got out of his own way. He started communicating effectively and things got better. So, I mean, I care about people so much and I care about the success of their business. If removing myself from the equation is what's going to make it work, and that's what I did with this one. I was like, I'm
Right.
out. I have to remove myself. We have to close doors in a couple months if need be, and this is where we're at. So I'll
Mhm.
do whatever it takes on my end to make sure that I'm doing the right thing for the
Mhm.
business. And I've hit those kind of
Yeah.
crossroads before with other companies where we hit the crossroad and I'm like, I morally cannot keep taking their money until they shift, until they figure this
Right.
out and do a little bit better, right? So, um, in another instance, I put myself on the chopping block because I knew that things just needed to shift. And my client tried to fire me after that, but it was what was needed for the company and it worked. The shift worked.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't let him fire me because I was like, nah, dude, you need me too much. And he was like, you're right.
That's funny.
I'm like, we're not done yet. You
Yeah.
can't fire me yet. He was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love you. You're good.
That's funny. But it's that work, you gave an example of like really a troubled situation where the company was like, if we don't
Mhm.
fix, we're done.
Yeah.
But I mean, what we see a lot is good companies, but there's more change that needs to happen like goal
Hmm.
wise, right? Like so we see
Yeah.
companies, for instance, like I've got a client we've been working with for a while now that's a landscaping business that has a lot of project oriented business. It's all, RFPs from municipalities or big companies, then they do big projects for them. And you can imagine buyers, there's a value for that business and it's still a great business, right? But what makes it better is, can we get any kind of recurring revenue contract service agreements with those municipalities or companies to do some of their other work, right? So we would say the way we can collaborate on something like this is we would say, hey, business owner, the goal is 30% of revenue in this service category, right? These service agreements. Then
Mhm.
insert Misty to say, okay, let's create the right accountability, get the right team members moving in that direction. How do we fix elements of the business to, not necessarily fix it, but how do we make this a strategic shift in the
Right.
org so that, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, when you are ready to sell, Mr. Business Owner, it's not just a pure RFP business that we see today. We've got 25, 30% of the business, and that makes it just much more valuable. So we
Hmm.
we think of ourselves as a lot of like, what's the end, like begin with the end in mind, the old Stephen Covey, right? And so like this is what looks like over here when we want to sell it,
Hmm.
but there's a long road to get to here, right? So how do we do
Yeah.
that? And that's where I think you're coaching all that. Like again, we know our swim lane. We want to be a guide to say,
Hmm.
here's what we want you to get it to. Now surround yourself with the right talent and coaches like you to go and do
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, definitely. And I am fortunate to have the ability to suss out what needs to shift for the very specific business because I insert myself into the business. I get to know the business owner and then figure it out per business. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's not a black and white checklist. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
totally.
there's a company that I've been working with. We're on our third year now, and the aim is to sell. It's to exit. Okay, are we
Mhm.
efficient? Are we organized? Do we have the culture set? And these are the things that we talk about every single meeting. Where are we at with
Mhm.
getting more organized? Do we have SOPs in place? Like efficiency is
Yeah.
such a big thing. And then the other part of it is making sure that the CEO actually becomes the CEO and is removable from the business. So that's a huge
Mhm.
part of are we going to sell it? Because if the CEO isn't replaceable, guess what? It's going to be hard for a buyer to come in and put somebody in that position.
Right.
So it's getting the
Yep.
business to basically run at like clockwork and maybe put
Yep.
somebody in that management position that then just allows the CEO to go and play with, networking and people and numbers and really focusing on the culture, which is the things that they're supposed to be doing instead of doing
Yeah.
all of the day-to-day tasks. So that's a big
No.
part of it
Yeah.
too.
100%. Yeah, we tell people, our business owners is like, you want to try to make yourself, if you want to leave, make yourself obsolete, right?
Mhm.
Go to the owner's box. Or there's other alternatives where people are like, no, no, I want to be backed by private equity. I want to keep doing what I'm doing, but I want to take some chips off the table and I want to just keep running the business. And in that case, you still want to have redundancies and a depth of a management team. That's really important. But you still want to have like if you're in that seat of wanting to like keep in it, we want people, to get maximum value is if you're not fully in the owner's box, we want to tell the market genuinely that, you're willing to stick around for 3 to 5 years because buyers are assessing risk, right? Even though I may tell someone, oh, I'm not important to the business. They're not going to believe me. At the end of the day, they want to say, okay, unless you really are, you've got a CEO running it, then you're still
Mhm.
important. You're important for some key decisions, and all that. So, there's a lot of work that that prepping for sale, right? Which, I think you play a big role in and, we can collaborate on in that way, which is really important.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
definitely. So this has been a great conversation. We need to get wrapping up so we don't like take away everybody's attention spans.
perfect.
This has been great. And I know it's just an overview of what you do, and that's where we start in this conversation. So, again, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your passion for people. Thank you for being a giver in this space and just being a good human. So, I appreciate it.
You bet. Ditto to
Yeah,
you. And I look forward to doing more work together,
definitely.
collaborating, and
Yeah,
started to. Yeah.
it'll be a lot of
Thank you so much
fun.
for having me. Yeah.
Of course. So before we close, what is one way that the audience can reach out to you? We'll provide everything else in the description. So just one way, please.
Email is probably best, and we
Okay.
can put that in the background. Yeah.
And what's your email, just real quick?
Oh, it's long, but I'll give it to you. B Katsnelson at blackironadvisors.com.
And spell your last
Or
name,
I can give
please.
Katsnelson. So B
Perfect.
Katsnelson, blackironadvisors.com. But advisors is like the British spelling, ERS, not ORS, which trips people up. I'll give you my phone number too, cell phone 720-538-5417. So people text or call that number too. Happy to, that's probably easier than the 30-character email address.
Well, you're brave for giving out your phone number. So, yeah, kudos to you. Thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope we get to see you back on the show again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was an honor to have this conversation with you. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. All right, you guys, if you love Boris, please reach out to him. If you're trying to sell a business, please reach out to him. And if you have a franchise and want to get out of it, please reach out to him. And I'm done. So until next time, we will see you guys soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the Wealthy Mind podcast. Please be sure to download the Wealthy Mind app today and make sure to support your local Dress for Success.